My name is Owen Caffrey. I'm blind and I write horror fiction. My readers say my writing is unlike anything else they've encountered, not because of the plots, not because of the monsters, but because of the way it feels. Physically feels. One reviewer wrote that reading my work was like being handed something in the dark and not knowing what it was until your fingers found the shape of it. I take that as a compliment. I write the way I experience the world, through sensation, through texture, through the specific information that surfaces give your hands when you're paying attention. I don't describe a beautiful day by the color of the sky. I've never seen the sky. I describe the warmth on the back of your neck that arrives before you're aware the clouds have shifted. The way good weather smells different from bad weather 6 hours before the change comes. The specific weight of summer air against your forearms when you step outside in July. I don't write what things look like. I write what they feel like from the inside. My readers say this is why my horror gets under the skin in a way they can't explain and can't shake. They say it feels too real, too physical, too much like something that happened to them rather than something they read. I used to think that was craft. I know now that it was something else entirely. Because for 8 months, something lived on the ceiling of my study and fed on every horror word I wrote. All right. Let me start from the beginning. I'm blind. Have been since the day I was born, which means I never had to grieve my sight the way people assume I did. You can't mourn a room you've never been in. So I built a different one instead. One made of touch, distance, texture, and memory. Most people, when they imagine blindness, imagine darkness. They close their eyes and they think, this is what he lives in. But that's not right either, because darkness is a visual concept. Darkness is the absence of something you're used to having. I'm not in darkness. I'm in a world made entirely of other things, of sound and texture and temperature and distance, and the specific way air moves differently in a large room than a small one. I navigate by touch and by memory. I don't use a cane, not in spaces I know. In my own home, I move with both hands low, fingertips trailing along whatever surface is nearest. Reading the world the way you'd read a face in the dark, slowly, completely, until you know it better than you'd know it with the lights on. I know my home by feel the way most people know a face by sight. The hallway plaster is rough. The study walls are smoother. The left side of the study door frame has a raised imperfection at shoulder height, where an old repair was never sanded down. The kitchen counter is exactly 23 inches high. The bedroom doorknob is cool in the morning and warm by noon. That isn't skill. It's just what happens when you spend your whole life building a world without vision. 8 months ago, I moved to a rural property 40 minutes outside Millhaven because the city was too loud. When you're blind, sound isn't background, it's the whole world. And too much of it becomes unbearable. I needed silence. I needed to hear my own thoughts. The house was single-story, surrounded by fields, with a tree line to the north and the nearest neighbor half a mile away. At night, the quiet was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. I thought that was peace. I didn't understand that silence can be a hiding place. In the city, there's too much noise to hear what's there. Out in the country, there's just enough quiet to hear what shouldn't be. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not rot or death. Nothing obvious enough to make you flinch and name it as wrong. Just something faintly organic that didn't belong. Warm, close, and faintly animal, like something that had been folded into a dark space for too long. For a moment, I thought it might have been coming from the window I always opened before I started writing. I noticed it 3 weeks after moving in, while I was dictating at my desk. It was chapter 4, one of the darker sections. The scene where my protagonist realizes too late that the thing following him isn't trying to kill him, it's trying to watch him. I stopped mid-sentence. The smell had changed. It was stronger now, as if whatever was producing it had moved closer while I was speaking. I wrote it off at the time. A draft of air maybe, a trick of a quiet house, something ordinary enough to ignore. But there was one thing I didn't understand until later. The smell never appeared during the calm parts, not during the scene setting, not during dialogue, not in the spaces between the fear. It only came when I wrote horror, every single time. The second thing was the sound. The sounds started on a Thursday, past midnight. I was in the kitchen, right hand on the counter, waiting for the kettle, when I heard something move in the study. Not footsteps, not the creak of a floor under weight, something else. A dry, papery shifting sound with a wet edge underneath it, like skin dragging slowly across a hard surface, like something large repositioning itself with great care. It lasted 2 seconds, then it stopped. Here is the thing about being blind that matters right now. I don't get to glance toward a sound. When I hear something I can't explain, the only tool I have is to go toward it, to put my hands on it, to find it or not find it. I walked to the study doorway and stood there listening. Silence. I moved through the room slowly. Desk, bookshelf, back wall, window frame. Everything in its place. Everything exactly where it should have been. I went back to the kitchen. But that sound was not in my catalogue. 2 weeks of obsessive listening, every creak and tick and groan filed away until the house became familiar enough to trust. And I had never heard anything like it. And it had come from above the desk. Not from the floor, from above. 4 days later, my chair moved. I came into the study that morning and reached for it the way I always did. Same path, same height, same automatic motion I'd repeated hundreds of times without thinking. My hand closed on empty air. I found the chair 6 inches farther from the desk than I had left it. 6 inches. Small enough that someone else might have dismissed it. I didn't. I can't afford to. I sat down and laid both hands flat on the desk. The surface was familiar beneath my palms. The grain of the wood, the small gouge near the right edge, the lingering warmth left behind by the laptop. Then I realized the laptop was open. I had closed it the night before. I always close it.
I activated the screen reader. It does what it always does. Reads the current cursor position, the surrounding text, the document state.
The cursor sat in the middle of chapter 11, resting in the center of a paragraph I had dictated 3 days earlier. The one where my protagonist locks himself in a room and realizes, too late, that the thing he's been afraid of was already inside. I closed the laptop. Then I picked up my phone and said, "City, call 911.
Officer Reyes was professional, thorough, and completely certain I was fine. Every window was locked. Both doors were locked. No signs of forced entry. Nothing out of place anywhere he checked. "The chair," I said. "It was moved."
Mr. Caffrey.
"I know where my chair is. I know where every single thing in this house is." A pause. That careful, practiced pause people use when they're trying to decide whether to humor you or dismiss you.
Is it possible you moved it yourself and...
I'm blind, I said. I don't not register where I put things. That is the one thing I absolutely cannot afford to do. He didn't argue with that. He just gave me his card and told me to call if anything else happened, in the tone people use when they mean, please don't call us again about a chair. After he left, I stood in the middle of the living room and listened to the silence. It felt different than it had before, fuller, the way silence feels when something is holding very still inside it. Day 4. The smell came back in the bedroom, stronger this time, concentrated in a way that made the air feel occupied, like something had been lying on my sheets long enough to leave itself behind. I had been up late the night before, finishing chapter 12, the darkest chapter yet. I washed the sheets twice. Day 4. The smell came back in the bedroom, stronger this time, concentrated enough to make the air feel occupied, like something had been lying on my sheets long enough to leave itself behind. I had been up late the night before, finishing chapter 12, the darkest chapter yet. I washed the sheets twice. Day 7. I was dictating chapter 12 again, revising, reading the worst passages back aloud, when I heard that sound from the ceiling. The same dry, papery shifting as before, but now there was something underneath it. A tremor, sustained, rhythmic, the kind of shaking you feel in a body trying not to reveal what it wants. It came from directly above where I was sitting. I stopped breathing. I kept one hand flat on the desk and kept dictating. I moved into the calmer passage that followed, the aftermath, the false quiet, the part where the characters convince themselves the worst is over. The trembling stopped the instant the horror did. I went back to the dark section. It started again immediately. I stopped the recorder, sat in the silence with both palms flat on the desk, and for the first time since any of this began, I let myself think the kindest possible explanation, that I was losing my mind. It would have been easier, cleaner. A horror writer alone in a rural house, sleeping badly, working too many late nights, living inside violence and dread for hours at a time. The kind of man who starts hearing things because he expects them. That was the story I wanted. The problem was that the sound above me had changed the moment I stopped writing. It hadn't gone away. It had gone still, as if it knew I was beginning to doubt it. Day 9. I found the cabinet above the counter open. I keep it closed, always. An open cabinet at head height is not a small inconvenience when you navigate a room by proximity. It is a threat. I found it with my forehead. I stood in the kitchen with one hand pressed to the place where I'd hit it and realized the house had started doing something worse than moving things. It had started anticipating me, not guessing, learning. Learning the shape of my routines, learning the distances my hands trusted, learning which mistakes would cost me the most. A person might have left the cabinet open by accident. A person might have forgotten. A person would not know that an open cabinet is more dangerous to me than an open window. I called Reyes again. He sent a different officer this time, younger, less patient, the kind of man who already believes he knows what sort of problem he's walking into. He stayed in the house for less than 3 minutes. On his way out, he stopped in the doorway and asked, "Mr. Caffrey, is there anyone who could stay with you for a while? A family member?" I told him I had my brother. What I didn't tell him was that by then I had started to notice something else. Every time the house got too quiet, every time I stopped speaking aloud, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt attentive. After he left, I called my brother.
Install cameras.
my brother said.
Daniel, I'm blind.
I know.
Then what exactly am I supposed to do with cameras?
You're not supposed to do anything with them. I am.
I let that sit for a second. Daniel,
Owen, if something is happening in that house, I want proof. Real proof. Not your memory of where a chair was.
my memory is usually better than proof.
That's not funny.
I wasn't trying to be funny. He exhaled, the way he did when he was trying not to sound afraid.
Look, just let me set them up. 4 cameras. Living room, kitchen, study, hallway. If nothing happens, then fine. We'll call it a bad week and move on.
And if something does happen?
Then I want to be the one watching when it does.
I stood there with one hand on the desk and said nothing.
Owen?
Fine, I said at last. Install cameras. That same night, after the officer left, after I called Daniel, before he arrived the next day, I went back to my desk. I should have slept, I knew that. Any sensible person would have packed a bag, locked the door, and gone somewhere with other people in it. Somewhere with noise. But I was still trying to explain what had happened in a way that didn't involve admitting the impossible. A draft of air. A trick of distance. A mistake made by a man who spends too much time alone inside his own head. Something that sounded reasonable if I kept repeating it. So I sat down and opened chapter 13. The scene I'd been avoiding for 2 weeks. The scene where everything arrives. I was 40 minutes in, deep in it, reading a passage back aloud, the one that had taken me 3 drafts to commit to, when I stood up too fast. The way I do when something clicks mid-thought. I pushed back from the desk and walked toward the study doorway without running my hands along the desk edge first. 3 steps from the door, my face went through something. Not a wall, not a curtain. Hair. Long hair, hanging from above, dragging slowly across my forehead and cheek and the bridge of my nose. And I lurched backward and hit the bookshelf hard enough to send 3 books crashing to the floor and pressed myself flat against the shelves and could not, for a moment, remember how to breathe. I raised both arms above my head and reached slowly into the space where the hair had been. Nothing. Both arms fully extended, palms open, fingers spread. Standing on my toes, stretching everything I had. Nothing. The study was completely silent. The recorder still running on the desk. I called Daniel again after that. My hands were shaking too hard to hold the phone steady, and I could still feel the place where the hair had touched my face. "Daniel?" I said when he picked up. "I need you to install those cameras tomorrow, as fast as you can."
Owen, what happened?
I swallowed and looked up at the ceiling without meaning to. "Something happened," I said. "Something really happened."
Are you hurt?
No.
Then what happened? Talk to me.
I couldn't tell if I was breathing too fast or not enough. Either I'm losing my mind, or there's something in this house with me. And I think it's on the ceiling. Daniel came over that same day. He didn't say much on the phone, just,
"I'm coming over,"
in the voice he uses when there's no point arguing. He arrived an hour later, and I heard him move through the house the way he always does when he's checking something. Methodically, quietly, without commentary until he finds something worth saying. He checked every room, every window, every door. He opened closets, moved furniture, knocked on walls in a few places I hadn't asked about. He went through the study twice. I heard him stop at my desk both times, heard the chair roll slightly under his hand. He didn't say anything about the chair. When he finished, he came and sat across from me at the kitchen table and was quiet for a moment.
"There's nothing here, Owen."
I know what I felt.
"I know you do."
His voice was careful, not dismissive. Daniel had never been dismissive with me, not once in 37 years. Just careful.
"The house is empty. Everything looks normal. The study looks normal. The chair is where you always leave it.
I didn't say anything.
I'm not saying nothing happened. I'm saying I can't see it.
He stayed for dinner. We didn't talk about it again. After he left, the house felt even quieter than before, as if the silence had tightened around the walls. I sat at my desk for a long time with both hands on the surface and thought about what I can't see it meant coming from a man with working eyes. He came back the next morning with cameras. 4 of them: living room, kitchen, study, hallway, wide angle, good low light capability. He set them up on a cloud system, moving through the house with the quiet efficiency of someone who had already made up his mind. He didn't explain the decision out loud. He didn't need to. When he finished, he stood in the study doorway and said,
I'll watch the footage remotely. If something's there, we'll see it.
"And if nothing's there?" I asked.
Then nothing's there and we figure out something else. But Owen, if something is there, I'll call you the second I know.
He left. I sat at my desk and put both hands on the surface and thought about what it meant that my brother, who had walked through every room of the house and found nothing, had come back the next morning and installed 4 cameras without being asked. He believed me. He just couldn't see it yet. 2 days later, he called. I picked up on the second ring. Before I could speak, he said,
Owen, I need you to go outside right now.
"What?"
Don't ask me anything. Just get out of the house and wait for me. I'm already in the car.
"Daniel, what did you—"
Please.
His voice was doing something I had never heard from him in 37 years of being his brother. Not fear. Something that had moved past fear and hadn't found a name for where it landed. "Please, just go outside." I set the phone down on the desk and sat perfectly still for a moment with both palms flat on the wood. Then I got up, trailed my hand along the wall to the hallway, found the front door, and went outside. He arrived in 38 seconds. Tires on gravel, engine cut, door open before the car had fully stopped. He was on the porch before I could open my mouth, both hands already on my shoulders, already moving me toward the steps.
We're going.
"Daniel."
Right now.
I felt the trembling in his hands. Not nerves, not cold. The uncontrolled shaking of a body that had absorbed something it didn't know how to hold. "My things."
Leave them. Leave everything in that house and walk to my car right now. Please.
He walked me down the porch steps with himself positioned between me and the front of the house the entire way, like he didn't want to look at it. The engine started. Gravel snapped under the tires. The house fell behind us. He drove without speaking. "Tell me," I said.
Give me a minute.
I gave him the minute, listening to his breathing slowly finding its way back to something regular.
There's something in your house.
"I know that."
No, you don't. Owen, I watched 2 days of footage and it's there in almost every single hour. It walks on your ceiling.
I said nothing.
Like the ceiling is the floor. Like gravity is a preference it decided not to have. And it follows you. Every room you go into, it's already there. It moves when you move. It stops when you stop. This shit is bizarre, Owen. I don't think you've been alone in that house for a single second. It just watches you. That's all it does.
"What does it look like?" I asked.
I'll tell you when we're not driving.
We sat in his living room. He opened his laptop. I listened to his breathing and felt, through the couch cushion, the tension in his body. The kind you get when someone is looking at something they don't want to be looking at. For a long time, he said nothing.
Okay,
he said at last.
I'm going to describe it. It's long. Too narrow for the limbs, especially the arms. They're much too long, and they bend in directions arms aren't supposed to bend. Extra joints, maybe. And it doesn't move smoothly. It moves in these stopped, corrected little motions, like it has to calculate each movement before it makes it.
I kept my hands flat on my knees.
The hair, long, very long, hanging straight down from the inverted head, dead straight into the air of whatever room it's in. And the face, the eyes are too large, wide open. They never blink in any frame I can find. And whenever you're in the room, they're always pointed at you, the whole time. It never looks anywhere else.
Tell me about when I'm writing, I said. He shifted in his chair.
You know how you work. You dictate, then read it back aloud. You've always done it that way.
Yes.
Most of the time, it's just still, watching you. During the ordinary sections, the calm parts, the scene setting, it doesn't react at all. It could almost pass for part of the ceiling. But when you get to the dark material, the horror, Owen, it changes.
How?
It smiles.
The apartment went very quiet.
The mouth just opens too wide, too slowly. It's wrong in a way I can't explain cleanly, but I know it's a smile because of what the rest of it does.
What does it do?
It trembles, the whole body. Every time you read something terrible out loud, that thing on your ceiling trembles like it's hearing the best thing it's ever heard.
8 months. 8 months of horror read aloud in the dark. 8 months of that thing above my head feeding on every terrible thing I had put into the world. 8 months of smiles I couldn't see. The chair, I said.
The footage from the last night, after you went to bed, it came down off the ceiling and went to your study. It sat in your chair, put its hands on the desk the way you do, the height, the angle, the way you lean forward when you're thinking.
I said nothing.
It had watched you work so many times it knew every detail. It sat there in the dark going through your movements. No recorder, no laptop, just your movements.
How long? I asked.
40 minutes.
He breathed out slowly.
And the whole time, the whole 40 minutes, it was smiling. That wide, wrong, too slow smile.
Another pause.
It wasn't just watching you anymore. It was learning how you make the thing it likes.
I felt my throat tighten. It wanted to make it, I said. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I called Reyes the moment Daniel finished talking. He arrived 20 minutes later with Officer Park. Daniel turned the laptop toward them and pressed play. I listened to their breathing. For a while, it was ordinary, the breathing of two professionals watching something out of duty rather than belief, slightly bored, slightly impatient. The kind of quiet you hear when people are still deciding whether to take you seriously. Then it changed. I heard the exact moment both of them stopped performing normalcy and started reacting to what was on the screen. Reyes's breath caught. Park's went silent altogether. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Park, barely above a whisper, "Jesus." Then Reyes, slowly, choosing every word.
Mr. Caffrey,
"Yes?"
I owe you an apology.
Everything that had been in his voice before, the gentleness, the careful distance of a man managing what he believed was a fragile situation, was gone. What remained was something I recognized because I had been living with a version of it for months. The sound of someone who has just understood that the world contains something he did not know it contained.
Within 2 hours, every officer in Millhaven had been called in. 11 officers, 3 vehicles. The county sheriff, who, according to Park, still had dinner on his table. She said it quietly, almost to herself, like people do when they realize they've said too much. They weren't going to arrest something. There is no protocol for what was in my house. They were going because the footage showed something the human brain resists categorizing. And when that happens,
The instinct is to make sure someone else has seen it too, to spread the weight of it, to turn it into a shared problem, because no single person should have to carry it alone. I understood that impulse. Reyes stopped at the door on his way out.
Mr. Caffrey,
Yes?
don't go back to that house.
I won't, I said. Reyes called at 2 a.m.
We went through the whole property, every room, every closet. 7 officers inside, 4 on the perimeter. Mr. Caffrey, there's nothing there.
I thought about 8 months of something that never touched the floor. Something that had learned to live above the reach of hands, above the sweep of flashlights, above every place it made sense to look. Of course there's nothing, I said.
Just don't go back to that house, okay?
Okay. He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after that, and I thought about something that had been sitting at the edge of my mind since Reyes first told me they'd found nothing. Something I hadn't let myself look at directly until now. Why couldn't anyone see it in person? It was on the footage. Clearly, undeniably on the footage. 11 officers had watched that footage, and every single one of them had been disturbed enough to drive out on a Saturday night. It was real. It existed. The cameras had caught it hundreds of times across 6 days, in every room, at every hour. But 7 officers inside the house, flashlights, a full search, nothing. Why? Did it know when people were coming? Did it hear the cars on the gravel road and, what, hide? But where? Daniel had described something too large to fold into a closet, too strange to pass for furniture. And the house was single-story, no basement, no attic, nowhere to go. Unless hiding wasn't the right word. Unless it wasn't hiding from the officers specifically. Unless it only existed, could only be perceived through a lens. I turned that over for a while and didn't like where it went. Because if that was true, it meant something stranger and worse than a creature that hid when company came. That was 2 weeks ago. I'm living at Daniel's apartment now. His couch, closer to the front door. I find that matters to me. I've gone back to writing. 2 chapters left. I type instead of dictating now, one hand trailing the keyboard, slower than usual. I've been writing this account for 3 days. Not for publication. Maybe just to have it outside my own head. Maybe because I spent 8 months feeding something in the dark, and putting horror into words is the only way I know how to process anything. Daniel checks on me every few hours. I understand what he's doing, and I don't ask him to stop. The apartment has the ambient noise of a city. Footsteps above, voices through walls, the urban static I moved away from because it overwhelmed me. I find it comforting now. Silence is not something I trust anymore. I'm writing this at Daniel's kitchen table, both hands on the surface. 2 in the morning, Daniel asleep. The city outside dropped to a low, reassuring hum. I've been working through everything from the beginning. The smell, the sounds, the chair, the cabinet, the hair in the doorway. All of it, in order, finding words for things that resisted being worded. I just finished the part about the smiling, and I need to tell you something. 2 minutes ago, I felt it. Not heard, felt. A faint transmission through the kitchen table under my palms. Rhythmic, sustained. That specific, unmistakable trembling I spent weeks cataloguing in my study 40 minutes north of here. I pressed both hands flat on the surface, tilted my head back slowly, listened to the ceiling of Daniel's kitchen, the ceiling of a 4th-floor apartment in the middle of a city, with everything I had. The trembling continued for 30 seconds, then stopped. And the silence that followed was not the silence of an empty room. It was held silence, the the silence of something that had just remembered to be still. I sat here for a long time before I started typing again, and I've been thinking about what I now understand, the thing that was right in front of me for 8 months and that I only see clearly now, writing it all down in order. It didn't follow me to this apartment. It followed the story. It doesn't care where I live. It cares what I write. It cares what I say out loud in the dark. And I've spent the last 3 days dictating every terrible thing that happened to me, reading it back aloud the way I always do, testing the sentences, committing to the worst parts because the worst parts are the ones that matter. I didn't bring it with me. I called it back. I am going to wake up my brother now, but before I do, before I press my hands flat on this table one more time and feel what I know is going to be there, I want to say this, for the record, to whoever reads this account. It doesn't want to kill me. It never did. It wants me to keep writing. And the most terrifying thing, the thing I've been sitting with for the last 10 minutes while the trembling builds steadily above my head, is that the book has never been better.